I never thought a simple slip on the wet pavement could turn my life into a full-blown soap opera. One second I was cursing the universe for its lousy timing. The next I was staring at the ceiling of a hospital room, wondering if I had been transported into some twisted romantic comedy directed by fate itself. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, casting sterile shadows across the room. I tried to sit up, my body screaming in protest. Pain radiated through my side, sharp and unyielding, as if reminding me that accidents have the cruelest ways of keeping memories alive. And then I saw him. He was leaning over my bed with that calm, professional posture of a nurse, clipboard in hand, but my heart didn't register the uniform or the medical tools. My brain locked onto a face, familiar yet impossible. Those eyes, the same intense green eyes that once made me tremble with longing and despair, now looked down at me, full of gentle concern. It was Daniel. Daniel, the boy who had shattered my heart without a word years ago, was now standing at the foot of my recovery, checking my vitals as if nothing had ever happened. A strangled laugh escaped me, a mixture of disbelief and bitter amusement. How is it possible, I wondered, that the one person I never expected to see again would be the one taking care of me in the most vulnerable state of my life? His lips quirked in a subtle smile, the kind that used to make my chest ache with unsaid confessions, but now it carried an unfamiliar maturity, a hint of guardedness shaped by years of distance. I tried to speak, my throat dry and stiff, but the words faltered. You're here. I managed to croak, half amused, half terrified. I'm here, he said simply, voice calm but laced with a tension that mirrored the storm raging in my chest. He adjusted the foreline attached to my arm, careful, meticulous, but every motion seemed laden with a past that neither of us could ignore. The first days of recovery were an emotional roller coaster. Painkillers blurred the edges of reality, but every time my eyes met his, memories came crashing back. Late-night conversations that ended in silence, the warmth of shared jackets during winter walks, and the agonizing sting of his sudden disappearance from my life. I had moved on, or at least told myself I had, but now the past wasn't just a ghost. It was a living, breathing presence who smiled at me while checking my pulse. The hospital room became our strange liminal space. Outside, life continued. Cars honked, nurses shuffled past, machines beeped, but inside, time seemed to bend, compressing years of unresolved emotions into stolen glances and hesitant conversations. Daniel's touch was professional, yet intimate. Every adjustment of my blanket, every brush of his fingers against my skin, sparked memories of touches that had once been forbidden, yet unbearably sweet. I don't know how to act, I admitted one evening as he checked my chart. My voice trembled with a mixture of frustration and longing. It's like, seeing you here is a punishment and a gift at the same time. He didn't look up immediately. The silence stretched, thick with emotion neither of us wanted to fully name. Finally, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture that had once driven me crazy with longing. I know, he said quietly. I didn't expect this either. But fate doesn't always care about our plans. And that was the beginning of an unspoken truce. We navigated the complex choreography of proximity and distance, each day a delicate dance between old wounds and tentative hope. Nurses and patients passed by, oblivious to the charged tension in our small corner of the hospital. Every time he smiled at me, I felt that same inexplicable pull, the gravity of years that had never truly forgotten. It was in those moments, lying in the hospital bed with an aching body and a heart that refused to obey reason, that I realized how fragile and beautiful human connections could be. The accident, the pain, the unexpected reunion, it was as if the universe had conspired to give us a second chance, though wrapped in confusion, anger, and longing. Our conversations started cautiously. He asked about my work, my family, the trivialities of everyday life, and I responded, careful to mask the storm of emotions inside me. Yet, the past always crept in. His laugh that mirrored the nights we once shared, his gaze that seemed to measure my soul, the way his hand lingered slightly longer when adjusting my blanket. Then came the nights, quiet, almost unbearable nights where the hospital room dimmed to a soft, sleepy darkness. The distant hum of machines was the soundtrack to confessions we couldn't fully voice. One night, driven by a mix of frustration and longing, I finally asked the question that had haunted me for years. Why did you leave? Why did you just disappear? Daniel looked at me then, a mixture of guilt and sorrow in his eyes, and for the first time in years, the walls between us seemed to crumble. I thought I was protecting myself, he admitted. I wasn't ready, and I didn't know how to tell you. I thought running away was easier. The confession, though painfully honest, didn't erase the past, but it opened a door that had long been closed. I felt tears sting my eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief, of validation, of the possibility that what we had lost could be found again. Days turned into weeks. Each interaction, each shared smile, each lingering glance built a fragile bridge over the chasm of years. We learned to speak a new language of intimacy, one that acknowledged past pain but dared to hope for tenderness, for understanding, for the kind of love that could withstand the scars of life. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the large hospital window, bathing the room in golden light. I watched him as he adjusted my pillow, his expression thoughtful, almost protective. The absurdity of the situation struck me. Was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from a freak accident, yet feeling more alive than I had in years, all because of the presence of the one person I thought I'd lost forever. I reached out hesitantly, my hand brushing against his. He froze for a heartbeat, then allowed our fingers to intertwine. It was a small gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything we had been through. Heartbreak, confusion, longing, and finally, the tentative promise of something more. From that moment, the world outside ceased to matter. In our little corner of the hospital, time slowed. We shared stories, laughed at old memories, and even allowed ourselves to dream of a future together, a future that had once seemed impossible. The proximity, the gentle touches, the near constant awareness of each other's present seat was intoxicating, a heady mix of nostalgia and desire. But healing, both physical and emotional, was never linear. There were moments of doubt, flashes of anger, and nights when the silence between us felt unbearable. Yet, through it all, there was an unspoken understanding that love, when true and persistent, could navigate even the messiest of beginnings. By the time I was discharged, the bond between us had deepened into something undeniable. The goodbye at the hospital exit wasn't a parting. It was the first step into a shared journey. He held my hand as we walked out into the bustling streets of the city, a world full of noise and chaos. Yet in our private bubble, it felt like the first time we had ever truly breathed. Daniel squeezed my hand, a silent promise, and I knew without words that the story of us was far from over. The accident had been a cruel twist of fate, but it had also been a catalyst, a reminder that sometimes love waits patiently for its chance to bloom, even through pain, regret, and years of separation. As we stepped into the sunlight, the distant skyline of the city stretched before us, and I felt a thrill of hope. The world was unpredictable, often unfair, but somehow, in the chaos of life and the remnants of heartbreak, we had found each other again. And that was all that mattered. The days after leaving the hospital felt surreal. I walked through the familiar streets of the city, yet everything had shifted. Every corner, every coffee shop, every echo of laughter in the distance seemed to remind me of Daniel, of the past we shared, and the fragile thread that now tethered our hearts together. Our first real meeting outside the sterile hospital walls was awkward, yet charged. We chose a small cafe tucked away from the bustling streets, a place neither of us had been to before, but one that promised privacy and quiet. I arrived first, my hands trembling slightly, not from nerves about coffee, but because the thought of seeing him again in the flesh was overwhelming. When Daniel walked in, the world seemed to pause. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, his hair slightly tousled from the morning rush, but that familiar intensity in his green eyes had not changed. The sight of him ignited something deep within me, a mix of nostalgia, desire, and that old, unhealed ache. "Hey," he said softly, his voice catching slightly, betraying a hint of the nervousness he usually hid so well. "Hey," I replied, my own voice barely above a whisper. We stood for a moment, hesitant, unsure if the other would break the silence first, or if our past would flood the space with unspoken tension. Finally, I gestured toward a corner table. "Shall we sit?" He nodded, and we moved through the cafe, the world outside continuing as usual, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing at our little table. Once seated, we ordered coffee, our hands brushing once as we passed money to the cashier. That brief contact sent a jolt of electricity through me, a reminder that some connections never truly fade. We talked cautiously at first. The conversation skirted around our current lives, work, family, the mundane details, but the undertow of unspoken emotions was palpable. Each smile, each glance, each subtle gesture carried the weight of years of separation, pain, and longing. "You look good," I said finally, unable to resist. "I mean, really good." My words were clumsy, but sincere, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Daniel's lips curved into a small, almost shy smile. "Thanks, you too. I wasn't sure what this would be like. Seeing you outside the hospital. It's strange, isn't it?" I said, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "Like we're in the same world, but everything has changed." He nodded, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was comfortable, not awkward, as if we were reacquainting ourselves with each other's presence rather than just words. After that first meeting, our interactions grew more frequent. We began spending time together under the guise of casual friendship, though the tension between us was impossible to ignore. A walk through the park, a visit to the library, shared meals at quiet diners, the city became our canvas for a slow, careful reintroduction. Every touch, intentional or not, was a spark. Every laugh shared was a bridge over the gap years had carved between us. But as much as I wanted to move forward, the past lingered. Memories of heartbreak haunted my quiet moments. I remembered the nights I had spent wondering what went wrong, the texts unanswered, the sudden disappearance that had left me unraveling. And yet, every time I looked at Daniel, every time our hands brushed or our eyes met, I felt the potential for healing, for rediscovery, for something profound that neither of us had dared to imagine before. One chilly evening, we found ourselves walking along the river, the city lights reflecting off the water in dazzling streaks of gold and silver. The night was quiet, the hum of distant traffic a soft background to our conversation. I shivered slightly, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Without thinking, Daniel draped his own jacket over my shoulders. "You're freezing," he said, his voice low, intimate. My heart skipped. The gesture was simple, but in it was an undeniable closeness, a rekindling of intimacy long dormant. Thanks," I muttered, unable to meet his eyes at first. But when I did, I saw something I hadn't expected: vulnerability. Not the clinical, professional mask of the hospital, but raw, human vulnerability that mirrored my own. We continued walking, shoulders brushing occasionally, each contact sending waves of warmth through me. The air was crisp, and I felt the tension between us growing impossible to ignore. When we reached a quiet bench overlooking the water, we sat down. The city sprawled behind us like a living painting. For a long time, we said nothing. Words seemed inadequate, unnecessary. And then, almost instinctively, I reached out, taking his hand in mine. His fingers intertwined with mine, firm and familiar, and I felt a deep, shivering relief. "I've missed this," I admitted quietly, the words barely audible over the gentle lapping of water against the pier. "I've missed you too," he said, his voice steady but his grip tightening slightly. Every day, even when I tried not to think about it, I remembered. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where we allowed ourselves to be honest, to admit to feelings long suppressed. The city around us faded into insignificance. For the first time in years, we existed in a bubble of shared presence, where the past hurt and the future uncertainty couldn't intrude. But life, as always, demanded confrontation. Friends, family, societal expectations all posed subtle challenges to our emerging connection. Daniel's work schedule was demanding, mine even more so, and every encounter was a balancing act between normalcy and the extraordinary intimacy that was unfolding. Yet, despite the obstacles, we found ways to be clothes-stolen moments in coffee shops, late-night phone calls, texts that carried hidden smiles and inside jokes. There was a night, late in November, when the first snow of the season fell. I was walking home, the flakes dusting my hair and shoulders, when my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel, "Look outside." I looked up, and across the street, I saw him standing there, hands in pockets, scarf wrapped loosely around his neck, eyes alight with mischief and warmth. Without hesitation, I crossed the street. The world seemed to hold its breath as we approached each other, the snow falling around us like a scene from a film. He took my hand again, guiding me to a quiet park bench illuminated by a single street lamp. "I wanted to see you," he said simply. I couldn't wait any longer. I laughed softly, snowflakes melting on my eyelashes. "I feel the same," I admitted. The words were simple, but they carried years of longing, regret, and hope all at once. And then, without another word, he leaned in, pressing his lips gently to mine. The kiss was tentative, exploring, carrying both the weight of past pain and the thrill of rediscovery. I responded instinctively, letting go of the restraint I had clung to for so long. The snow swirled around us, the city a distant murmur, and for the first time, I allowed myself to fully feel the depth of our connection. From that night onward, our relationship blossomed. It wasn't without its challenges, insecurities, lingering doubts, the occasional awkward moment, but it was authentic, tender, and fiercely resilient. We learned to communicate not just with words, but with gestures, glances, and touches that spoke volumes. Daniel became not just my partner, but my anchor. He celebrated my successes and soothed my fears. I, in turn, became a steadfast presence in his life, offering reassurance, laughter, and companionship. Together, we navigated the complexities of adult life in a city that could feel both lonely and overwhelming, always returning to the shared sanctuary we had created in each other's company. Family gatherings, holidays, work events all became opportunities to strengthen our bond, to assert quietly but firmly that we belonged together. Friends were gradually introduced to the reality of our relationship, their initial skepticism giving way to acceptance as they witnessed the genuine affection and mutual respect between us. Months passed, and the seasons changed. Each moment we spent together, whether mundane or extraordinary, was imbued with a profound sense of gratitude. We had survived the pain of separation, the uncertainty of reconciling past hurts, and the unpredictable twists of fate. And through it all, we had chosen each other, repeatedly, with open hearts and unwavering commitment. One evening, as we sat on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline, wrapped in blankets against the crisp air, I realized how far we had come. Daniel leaned against me, his head resting on my shoulder, and I felt a deep, encompassing peace. "I never imagined we'd end up here," I whispered, tracing patterns on his hand. "Neither did I," he admitted, his voice soft but firm. "But I wouldn't change a thing. Every misstep, every heartbreak, it led us to this." We sat in silence, letting the city lights shimmer around us, our hearts beating in quiet synchrony. For the first time, the past felt like a distant echo rather than a shadow over our present. The accident, the hospital room, the years of longing, all had been a crucible forging a love that was resilient, tender, and real. And as the night deepened, with the stars scattered like diamonds overhead, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we had found something rare and precious: each other. Our story, once broken, had been mended not by chance, but by courage, honesty, and the enduring power of love. And in that knowledge we found not just happiness, but a profound sense of belonging, a reminder that even after the darkest storms, the heart has the capacity to heal, to forgive, and to embrace a love that endures. The first winter together felt like a dream we never wanted to wake from. Snow blanketed the city in soft white layers, muffling its usual chaos and creating a sense of quiet intimacy. Daniel and I navigated these days like explorers in a world we had both once feared, now discovering its beauty hand in hand. One particularly crisp morning, I woke to find a note tucked onto the kitchen counter. "Meet me at the park at noon. Dress warm." My heart leapt with anticipation and nervousness. Memories of the hospital room, the accident, and our tentative beginnings flooded back. But this note promised something new, an adventure together, free from the shadows of our past. When I arrived, Daniel was already there, bundled in a thick coat, his hair dusted with snow. He waved as I approached, and in that moment, the years apart melted away. We walked through the park, crunching snow underfoot, talking about everything and nothing. There were no walls, no hesitation, only the comfort of two hearts rediscovering rhythm together. He stopped at a small clearing, and my eyes widened. A blanket was spread on the snow, 2 mugs steaming with hot chocolate in hand, and soft fairy lights wrapped around the surrounding trees, casting a magical glow. My breath caught not just from the cold, but from the sheer thoughtfulness of the moment. "I wanted to do something special," Daniel said, voice low, eyes shimmering with a mixture of pride and vulnerability. "For us, for the second chance we've been given." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "It's perfect," I whispered. "You always know how to make everything feel, right?" We sat together, sipping our chocolate, hands brushing and fingers eventually intertwining. We spoke of dreams we had once kept secret, of fears we had carried alone, of moments when life had felt unbearable. And yet, every confession, every laugh, every shared glance wove our hearts closer, threading our lives into a tapestry richer than either of us had imagined. The weeks that followed were a series of firsts and rediscoveries. First shared apartment, first holiday together, first mornings waking up with each other's arms tangled like vines. Each day was a negotiation between independence and intimacy, freedom and belonging, yet the balance always leaned toward love. We learned patience, compromise, and the art of listening, not just hearing, but truly understanding. Challenges still emerged, subtle yet persistent. Friends questioned the speed of our reconciliation. Work responsibilities tested our ability to remain present with each other. And occasionally, the shadows of past heartbreak threatened to intrude. But every challenge only reinforced our commitment, reminding us that love was not a fleeting emotion, but a conscious choice, a decision we made daily, regardless of circumstance. One evening, months into our life together, we attended a gallery opening. Art had always been a shared passion, and the event was an excuse to dress up, to step into the world as a couple unafraid of judgment. As we moved through the space, Daniel's hand found mine, squeezing gently, a silent assertion that we belonged to each other, and to no one else. A piece caught my eye, a painting of 2 figures walking along a snowy city street, their outlines blurred but unmistakably entwined. I glanced at Daniel, heart swelling. "It's like us," I murmured. He smiled, leaning in close. "It's us," he agreed. "Every step, every stumble, leading us here." That night, walking home beneath the soft glow of streetlights, snow falling lightly around us, I realized how far we had come. From the pain of separation to the delicate healing of reconnection, we had built something enduring. Our love was no longer defined by the past, but strengthened by it. Every scar, every tear, every moment of longing had contributed to a bond that was unbreakable. Winter gave way to spring, and with it a sense of renewal. We spent lazy afternoons in sunlit parks, picnicking beneath blooming trees. Weekends were for exploring the city, discovering hidden cafes and bookstores, sharing meals, stories, and dreams. Every interaction was layered with laughter, warmth, and the quiet satisfaction of simply being together. On one particular spring evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the river, Daniel turned to me with a seriousness that made my heart race. "I've been thinking," he began, voice low and deliberate, "about us, about the future. I don't want to imagine it without you in it." I felt a surge of emotion, my chest tightening. "I feel the same," I whispered, searching his eyes for reassurance, finding only unwavering certainty. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. "I want to ask you something," he said, opening it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Time seemed to pause. The river flowed quietly before us, the city lights reflecting in the water like a million tiny stars. I felt tears slide down my cheeks, a mixture of joy, relief, and disbelief. After all the pain, the years of uncertainty, the twists of fate that had separated and now reunited us, this moment felt almost surreal. "Yes," I breathed, voice trembling. 1,000 times, yes. Daniel slid the ring onto my finger, and we laughed through tears, holding each other tightly, feeling the culmination of years of longing, heartbreak, and eventual redemption. It was a promise not just of a shared future, but of a love that had endured, survived, and flourished despite every obstacle. Our wedding was small but filled with meaning. Close friends, family who had come to understand and support our love, and a few familiar faces from our past were present. As we exchanged vows, the sunlight streaming through the chapel windows, I thought of every moment that had led us here, the hospital room, the accidental meeting, the slow dance of reconnection. Every heartbreak had been a stepping stone to this joy. Life after marriage was not without its challenges, but it was richer, fuller, and imbued with the kind of intimacy and understanding that only time and perseverance can cultivate. We moved into a cozy apartment, filling it with books, art, and mementos of our journey. Each morning, waking up beside Daniel felt like a gift. Each night, falling asleep in his arms felt like coming home. We traveled together, explored new cities, and returned to old favorites, collecting memories that stitched our lives ever closer. The city that had once been a backdrop to our separation now became a canvas for our shared experiences. Cafes, parks, bookstores, rooftops, and quiet streets became monuments to a love that had survived against the odds. Evenings were our sanctuary. We cooked together, laughed at each other's clumsiness, and shared quiet conversations that stretched into the night. We celebrated victories, comforted each other in losses, and held fast through uncertainties. Love, we discovered, was not just the extraordinary moments, but the daily acts of care, attention, and presence. Years later, sitting on the same rooftop where we had first acknowledged our love in the snow, Daniel rested his head on my shoulder. "Do you remember that night?" he asked softly. "How could I forget?" I replied, smiling. It felt like the world stopped just for us. He kissed the top of my head, and I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of our journey, a tapestry of pain, hope, reconnection, and enduring love. "We've come a long way," he said, voice filled with awe and gratitude. "Yes," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "And I wouldn't change a thing. Every moment led us here." The city sprawled around us, lights twinkling like distant constellations. Life continued, unpredictable and messy, but we had discovered a truth that anchored us. That love, when genuine and resilient, could transcend mistakes, heartbreak, and time itself. As night fell and stars shimmered above, I felt a deep, encompassing peace. Daniel and I had faced the storm of the past, navigated its uncertainties, and emerged stronger, closer, and infinitely more connected. Our story, a tale of loss, reunion, and unwavering love, was far from ordinary, yet it was ours. And in that quiet, radiant moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Our hearts, once broken, had healed. Our love, once uncertain, had become a beacon of hope, joy, and resilience. And as we held each other beneath the vast, endless sky, I realized that life's twists, accidents, and second chances had given us the greatest gift of all: a love that was real, enduring, and truly, unconditionally ours. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.